Hey guys, this is Savannah from earthandwater.co. Today I am with Monique Grover. She is an intuitive empowerment coach, which is really awesome. I think we've really moved towards intuition a lot lately as a society and culture. We're getting more in tune with our intuition and that it is a real thing. But that means getting off all of these layers of self-doubt, and because we've been taught historically not to pay any of attention to our intuition, right? Because that kind of makes us our own person, and they didn't want us to be our own person. They wanted us to fall in line and be like everybody else, which we could dissect as being like a survivalist type thing. Back when we were living in villages and we needed everybody else, it was good to be liked and helpful for your survival and whatnot, and our loved ones would kind of crush our uh individuality so that the rest of the village would like us and help us survive and whatnot. But I'm getting on a huge tangent, so yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could totally go down that rabbit hole with you if you wanted to, but yeah, so I'm Monique. So my background has been really the last 10 years of just complete immersement in my own self-discovery and peeling back all those layers that you mentioned and really, looking at the familial societal conditioning that all of us have just naturally been exposed to. It doesn't mean that anything terrible happened or, that your life's a mess. It just means that, yeah, we've all been impacted by our environment, right? And kind of learning to hone in on what we have been conditioned to believe, experience, feel, whether that's emotionally, mentally, energetically, or physically, right? Being able to kind of shed those layers upon layers of those belief systems and then really discovering who the heck are you? Like who did you come in here in this world to be, right? Instead of just kind of like you talked about, a little bit of a robot just following along with what we're supposed to do, And so for me, this experience has been really empowering and really transformational in terms of understanding myself and really just feeling a lot more connected not only to myself but general spirituality, the universe, and even society as a whole. And so it kind of seems a little ironic because it's like we're shedding past the conditioning of society, yet there's so much more connection to be gained from this type of experience. So yeah, that's kind of been my background.
You're exactly right, though. The more we step into our own individuality and um yeah, it does connect us more to, it helps us find our place in society better. So it definitely has this counterintuitive effect.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's so cool. It's part of this process can be like uncomfortable, right? Because you got to look at your shit, you got to feel the pain. But it's like there's so much beauty in the unraveling of it and in that discovery process of like, wait a second, I'm realizing I'm living a certain way that I've been taught to live, right? Or believe or whatever. And maybe that's not lining up with what I actually want out of life. Maybe that's not in alignment with my goals, my purpose, my passion, right? And so, what do I believe? What do I want to do? What do I want to create in life? How do I want to present myself and live authentically as me, without having to adhere to those conditions? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And some people do really okay. So I think most people, it starts when we're little, right? It starts when we're
Yeah.
itty bitty. It starts when
Yeah.
we're like from the get-go. And
Mhm.
some people naturally are like, okay, and they just fall in line and they don't question it and they just go about it hunky dory, don't even think about it. And then like here they are in their 30s, in their 40s, and then they wake up when they're one day and they're like, oh my God, I have no idea who I am.
Mhm.
I've lived my entire life, 30, 40 years. That's a really long time. Just falling into the molds of wherever, whatever was expected of me. And now they like panic and they're trying to figure out, like, oh my gosh, I'm so behind. And
Mhm.
then you have the other people who like just kind of do their own thing from the get-go, and they get labeled as the rebels, the
Yep.
nonconformist. So society kind of like, not so much now. We are getting a lot more understanding. I'm love the shifts that are
Yeah.
happening in society and culture, and how we're being much more understandable with things, and like looking behind the behaviors. And now we're realizing it's like, oh, that kid's not trying to give me a hard time. That kid is having a hard time, which
Right.
is definitely not a luxury I grew up with. I was
Right.
definitely the nonconformist rebel type. And I didn't mean to be. I wasn't trying to be
Mhm.
bad. It's just I didn't understand why I was supposed to do that thing that everybody else was telling me I should do. I didn't want to do that.
Right. And I think there's so many varying degrees to that level of conditioning of being that kid, you know. I mean, actually, since I was a kid, I taught martial arts for like 10, 15 years.
That is awesome.
And I grew up doing martial arts, and then I ended up teaching at the school and blah blah blah. Anyway, so you watch a lot of kids, you know, you're around a lot of kids and you see all the different personalities, and it's very interesting to be able to watch like a sea of children and be able to notice like the differences, right? The differences in personality, the differences in how they're being presented with, like how they're presenting themselves with what they've been taught by their families, with how they're interacting with each other, right? And so it's just when you really watch with those set of eyes of like, okay, let me see what's behind the child, the persona, and let me see what is actually impacting that child, right? Then you can really see like the distortions, the conformities, the belief systems, and all the different ones that we all play, right? And each child has that to a varying degree. And so again, it's just really, really interesting to see. And then being able to now as an adult, right, look back on childhood and go, wow, I didn't even realize some of this stuff wasn't normal. I didn't realize that this was a conditioned belief. I didn't realize the perhaps pressure I took on, or the emotions I took on, or the physical pains I took on, like really anything, right?
Mhm.
So it's just like being able, I feel like I'm kind of getting all over the place, but being able to see that, and as an adult look back on yourself, go, oh wow, okay, this is what happened to me. This is, you know, by nobody's fault, it's just this is what happened, right? How have I been living this way, and how have I also been co-creating that pattern into my adulthood, right? And that's what people call their, you know, midlife crisis or whatever. It's like all of a sudden something happens and we realize, oh shit, what the heck am what how have I been living, you know? And sometimes that midlife crisis can come in the form of a physical illness or a financial crisis, or, you know, you're, I don't know, you just wake up one day and you feel like you don't know who you are anymore. But ultimately, what I believe is that when we have all of these stored traumas, right? Not trauma meaning like something terrible happened to you, but just this is what happened as conditioned children, right? You interpret things, you experience things, and you're a child, so you don't understand things as an adult would, and so you hold on to that in a childlike way, right? But then that gets trapped in your body, that gets trapped in your nervous system. And so now, because this is trapped in my nervous system, I did not have the tools or experience as a child to know how to handle whatever this was. Now it's recreating itself in my external reality. And so that cycle will keep repeating over and over and over again into my adulthood until it gets loud enough that I do something about it, right? And so when it gets loud enough, that's usually when we have those crises of the, you know, financial problems or the health crisis or whatever happens, right? And so it's like if we learn how to get more attuned to these cycles and just bring in a little bit more awareness and paying attention to the repeated patterns, because it's always a repeated pattern, right? Then there's so much beauty and magic, like I talked previously about the unraveling of that and really seeing the child. You get to separate yourself for once, because really whether you want to believe it or not, you're living as that child now in some form or fashion, right? And so then once you get to start bringing in that awareness, you get to go, oh, whoa, I've been living as a 4-year-old for 30 years, in a certain way, in a certain aspect of life, right?
Yeah.
And then you almost get to reparent that child, which is why I think society is shifting so much now. And we are becoming so much more aware now, which I think is a beautiful thing, because now I then get to give myself what I lacked at that time, what I wasn't able to experience at that time, the love, the compassion, the understanding, the explanation, whatever it is, right? I'm keeping this pretty general, but that that child needed. And then that's where that empowerment comes in, because now it's like, holy shit, I just discovered this whole thing that's been running my life. Now I'm able to take action and provide myself with the compassion and love that I need. So that's then going to make me feel empowered to discover, who the heck am I? Well, what is it that I want? Well, now I'm filling my own needs rather than needing everybody else to do it for me, and I think that's what's so exciting and beautiful and empowering, right? Because you're getting to give that gift to yourself, and in giving that gift to yourself, you're just setting the example and showing everybody else around you how to do that as well. And I think that's what's happening right now as a collective, is we're all starting to do this, and then that's why everybody's going, wait, I want to know who I am too, and then we start changing society.
Yeah, because there's a shift, right, that has to take place between being in those patterns of what happened when you were a kid. Because most of us are just children walking around in adult bodies. We hit 18 and we're thrown out into the world like, all right, you made it. There you go. You're a grown up now. And no, we're not. No, we're not. And empowerment really comes from, I think, shifting from that inner child state to like, oh gosh, I still feel like a kid, I don't know what to do, to deciding that you're the adult now and turning around and parenting yourself, which a lot of people I think are resentful towards and don't want to do, because like, we're humans and we're flawed just by nature, and that's okay. But a lot of us fall into that trap of, well, why should I have to parent myself? That wasn't my job. That was their job. And well, I mean, we can dissect that as much as you want to dissect it. We're just dealt the cards we're dealt, play them the best you can. It is what it is. The past is the past. They lived and grew up in a very different world than we did. And you have to really think about that and experience, like sit around and think about the life that they experienced and how that affected the choices they made and the words they said. And like, should they have just been a nicer person? Sure. But
Right.
at the same time, like they're most of them, they're also children in adult bodies doing the best that they can. And you know what? Children don't make the best decisions. And
Right.
so we have to like kind of remember that just because they look like an adult doesn't mean that they're not still a child.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's really challenging, especially as you first get into this process. I think at first, having a little bit of that resentment or anger or frustration towards parental figures, teachers, whoever impacted you, right? Whoever caused this trauma, right? And again, it could be actual abusive trauma. It could be you simply weren't given enough attention.
Well,
It,
I would
it
like to touch on that. We have
Mhm,
um, we have like an original energy signature.
mhm.
So trauma isn't necessarily like, oh, you were abused or you were in this horrific incident or anything. Trauma is anything that goes against that original energy signature. So you can have, for example, we'll say two brothers, okay? Twins, even like just exact same everything situation that they're growing up in. And if they grew up homeless, for example, that may have a significant traumatic impact on one of the kids. But then the other kid was like, that was the best time of my life. Are you kidding me? We were outside playing all the time. We were camping. Mom was always there. Like, so it just, what's traumatic to one person may not be traumatic to another. And it doesn't have to, homelessness is a pretty extreme example that I used, but it could be something super simple also that you found, like somebody told you to hush and calm down 3 times, and
Right. Yeah.
it can be things as simple as that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think part of this process, again, this is a challenging it's a challenging process because first of all, you have to become aware that you're even that child like I talked about, right? So you have to be able to open yourself up to see a different reality than what you have been living in for X amount of years, right? So that's challenge number 1.
Mm.
Okay.
And the hardest one off.
And I think a natural part of that process is again going to have those emotional reactions of frustration, anger, resentment, whatever, disdain towards whoever, right? And whoever impacted you in life. And I think that that is actually very healthy as long as you are aware of what's happening, right? And so basically, what is happening is we have this stored trauma in our bodies, like I previously mentioned, right? And just like how you brought up that example. Okay, so I experienced this trauma of being told to hush 3 times or being homeless, right? And that has been stored in my body. And it has been stored there because it was too much to deal with at that time. As a child, I didn't know how to handle that level of stress, anxiety, frustration, sadness, blah, blah, whatever the heck it was, right? And so then I just went, ooh, better put that away because I can't experience that right now.
Mm-hmm.
I have to survive and fit in with society so I can do well, right? So I can live.
Can't always have tantrums.
Absolutely, right? And so then, because it's stuck there, when as an adult we're going back to this, it's like I now as an adult have to re experience this pain
Mm-hmm.
that I really never experienced. Right? Thank you. Okay, so I now have an emotional release, right? That's coming up, and that pain is going to have anger, frustration, disdain, resentment all at the forefront because that's easier to feel than the actual pain that I was feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's very natural and normal to have those reactions. And like you said, what I think we need to remind ourselves of is although, yes, there are some shitty people in the world and people experience bad things all the time, and that's just an unfortunate fact of society right now. I try to remember or remind myself of none of this none of this happened to me, right? Like it was just what happened.
Mm-hmm.
It was just what happened. My parents didn't try to create the trauma that I held on to, right? It's just what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, we're all going to experience something differently, like you gave with that example with the twins. And so nothing had to happen to you. It's just what happened. And so as we're experiencing this emotional release, right? Again, I do think it's important to remind ourselves that okay, this sucked and I'm allowed to be mad about it. I'm allowed to be frustrated. I'm allowed to feel all these feelings and that's all okay. But where I need to be careful is blaming everybody else or the world or whatever. And so we see that all the time in relationships. We see that all the time in the workplace, right? We see how this pattern comes out and we just start attacking the closest thing to us because that's what is safe.
Mm-hmm.
That's what temper tantrums are about as a kid. You're lashing out and you're attacking what is safe because you don't know how else to handle it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the empowerment comes in when we can go, man, everyone's talking today. Can you hear them?
Yeah, but it's fine. I
Okay.
have a barker too. I have to close up all the doors and stuff so he doesn't see anything outside, or we'd have to
Yeah.
record everything.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what's going on, but
So fun.
anyway. So basically we're oh man, I got off track now. They distracted me. What was I saying?
That's a good question. I don't know.
They, oh, so when we're dealing with, when we're having that emotional release, right? Jesus Christ. Okay. When we're having that emotional release, we have to bring that awareness in, and that's where the empowerment comes in terms of being able to go, okay, I can understand as an adult not living as the child anymore.
Hmm.
That's where we separate ourselves. So the child is the one having the tantrum, getting mad at everything, right? Because that's the emotional release. So the empowerment comes in when I separate myself and I can hold the space for the child to be as an emotional mess as they want to be, while also being the container for that, so that I'm not just throwing all of my shit onto everybody else, right? And again, being able to hold and cultivate that space for yourself is where that compassion and acceptance and love comes in. And that's what's so beautiful, that's what's so empowering about it, because now you're able to provide everything that that child needed but didn't get at that time.
Yep. Absolutely. And you have to feel those emotions, those that resentfulness, all that anger, you have to feel that to be able to release it.
Right. Exactly. And if we don't find a healthy way to release that, right, then again, that's going to perpetuate that cycle
Mhm.
where it just gets louder and louder and louder. So you can either choose to let life make you deal with it, or
Mhm.
you can come at this with a little bit of, awareness and intention of going, okay, well, who the hell am I? What have I been believing for so long? And what truly resonates with me or not? Some of it you may keep, right? It's not like you're trying to rid yourself of your entire existence, right? You're just trying to start to find what is actually in alignment with you and the direction that you want to go. And that's ultimately going to change over time, too. So it really is a never ending process of evolution of your self discovery over time.
Yeah, and it is up to you if you want to, the again, like you said, life is going to bring it back up and bring it back up until you stop ignoring it, until you stop suppressing it. It's uncomfortable. The better way is almost always more uncomfortable, right? Because you can just sit in it. You can't, well, okay, you suppress it and you get stuck in these patterns and then you don't go anywhere. And then you're like, why am I feel like I'm running in place. I felt like I was working so hard towards this goal or that goal, but here I am with this again. And well, it's probably because you're suppressing what you need, what you don't want to feel. You don't want to face it. You don't want to sit with it because it is uncomfortable. But if you just allow yourself to sit with the discomfort and feel it fully until it's done being felt, because there is an end.
Mhm.
And it may be really powerful there for a minute. You may feel like your heart is going to literally burst from your chest, and you may feel it in your throat, and it may feel like heat. There's lots of things, but that is it being accepted. You got to get over to the other side of it to where it's not causing issues anymore, because it will get lodged in your body and literally make you sick. I
Right.
believe with every bone in my body, every fiber of my muscle, like everything that, um, are you familiar with the chakra system?
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I pinpoint the chakra system. I use the chakra system a lot to pinpoint ailments and problems and stuff. For exact example, stuff like we're talking about empowerment that is tied a lot to your throat chakra. And
Mhm.
so if you have felt disempowered or kind of pushed back and not free to express your feelings or your voice or anything, then you may find physical ailments coming up in the form of like teeth problems or
Yeah.
mouth issues, sore throats, like those types of things. And if you just, allow these emotions to come up, process them through, maybe journal them down. I am a huge advocate of journaling because, our brains, our minds just go and they can go in like 18 different directions. They can transcend dimensions. They can do all of these things that we can't really lay out in front of us and understand.
Mm.
But journaling, writing it down makes you formulate it in a straight line, which can be more easily understandable, and it gives you like this third person perspective to where you're not in it anymore, you're looking at it from the outside, which also makes it a little bit easier to process. And when you start figuring out like, oh, okay, so this pattern keeps coming up because this happened or this person said that and I internalized it and took it as, just a have all be all for the rest of eternity, and that doesn't align with my original energy signature of who I am. And if I can just, now I understand it, and now
Mm-hmm.
I can let it go and release it and make conscious decisions that put me in another direction that I know is better for me, then you'll see these problems that you had for your entire life possibly just
Right.
dissipate. Like, oh, it's a
Right.
miracle, they're gone.
Right. I think I see it as like an unraveling. And I like to use the imagery of like a spider web, you know? So there's so many layers upon layers in the spider web, and in the web itself, you have all these different sections, right?
Mm,
And so it's like the same belief system, the same problem that you're carrying around is the entirety of the spider web. And each, you know how they have like little
mm,
sections, right? So each section could be a different aspect of life that spider web that problem is affecting, right? So let's just take the example of a subconscious belief that I'm not good enough and apply that to career, and then relationship, and then health and fitness, and then um, just whatever else, right? Whatever other categories of life that you want to that you experience, right? And so the unraveling comes in, and why I think this is part of the challenge of this process is that, okay, I might have revealed something over here and now I'm feeling better about it, and then a couple of weeks later it gets pinged again, but it's over in this category. And then I deal with that, and then a couple of weeks later it gets pinged again, but it's over in this category. And so it's like we're dealing with that same core issue, although we might not understand that consciously, because often we don't, right? We don't understand what's happening consciously. We're bringing the consciousness, the awareness to that within the unraveling that we're doing, with the examples like you gave of being able to journal, tap into the chakras, all the different modalities you can use to get into it, right? But that's where that unraveling begins. And so some people are able to have huge shifts where like they sit with it one time, they're like, man, it's gone. Lucky them. My
yeah.
experience has been it's I'll have moments of, wow, that makes total sense. Wow, and I release a lot of it. But then, it comes around again and again. And so, I mean, honestly, personally, I've been working on probably the same two or three core patterns over the decade that I've been doing this work. Not to say that I haven't made any progress, right? But that's how deep it goes. Like there's so many layers that you're pulling back to see all the different avenues of how this one thing has affected your entire life, right? And again, that could be on an emotional level, on a mental level, on a physical level, within yourself and within external reality as well. So that's so complicated, but it's also so simple, which is what's so funny, right?
Fresh.
And frustrating, yes, because it's like we all just want, and again, me too, but we all just want it to be like, oh, done. And it's like, just kidding. Sorry. It's going to come back again. But the point that I try to help people with, and help people understand too, is that, again, how long has it been stored in your nervous system?
Mm,
X amount of years. It's going to take some time for it to undo itself, because also your body is now feeding off of this chemical addiction
mm,
to this blockage that was in your nervous system, right? So it's not just a mind game, it's a physical component as well, And so I think that's also why I tend to be more alignment with like holistic health and nutrition, and that all makes a huge, huge impact.
mhm.
If I can heal my body from outside as I'm healing it from the inside, well, then you're set up for success. It's still going to take you some time, but you're set up for success. Whereas if I'm ignoring my physical body and doing this internal work, yeah, you're going to make some good progress, but you're still going to have to work through those addictive chemicals that you're feeding off of. And then what gets really interesting is playing with how those chemicals then attach themselves to food,
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of went on a tangent there, but
No, it was great. I love the spider web analogy. I'd like to expand on that because create the web, the spider is essentially dragging that along with it, right?
yeah,
In everything it touches. And then
yeah.
again, spider webs are sticky. They're
Mm.
awfully sticky. They catch everything. You touch it, you're done. You're there. And then also, working through that thing, how big of a spider web did you build? A lot
Mhm.
of us
Yeah.
we've been building the same, we've been adding layers to the same spider web, to with the same aspects, these false beliefs, these harmful beliefs, the trauma, for decades. So
Yeah, definitely.
and it's going to take a long time to clean up,
Definitely.
fix everything.
Definitely. And again, kind of going back to what we talked about previously with the emotional release and just the process of stepping out. That's why it takes a while, because first I have to see it, then I have to release it, then I have to accept it. And then that was only one layer. And now I got to repeat that process 1,000 more times
Literally.
until I get to the center of the spider web, and it takes consistency. It takes a commitment. It takes, personally, I believe it takes you wanting to
Hmm.
get to the root of it for it to happen, because or else again we're just going to fall back into the natural repetition of the cycle or of the pattern that we've been used to living in for so long, and without conscious effort it's going to be really really hard to just dissipate that and work through that you know
Yeah, conscious effort is really all of the work. It's just being aware. You just got to be aware of every little thing all the time. No big deal, right?
No big deal, just start seeing life through completely different eyes, and those eyes that change literally every single day, so
Yep, yep. As
it's
soon
not
as you,
hard.
not at all, no. As soon as you figure it out, it's gonna flip itself on its head, and then you're gonna be like, "What? I thought."
Mhm, mhm. But, the beauty of that is for people that are in the process of that and struggling with it, is that there's so many different tools to be able to use, ultimately just finding the ones that work best and resonate with you. But also, I believe being able to, at the same time, really pay attention to your body and how you're feeling. And
Mhm.
that will give you the answers as to what you need to do. So I think it makes it a little bit easier on yourself if we just learn to pay attention to those sensations and allow that to be the compass, right? That guides us through this experience, because again, the experience can be a challenge, especially on your own,
Mhm.
without any guidance or help. Sometimes it's overwhelming. If you're in the middle of an emotional release moment and you're having a week long temper tantrum of pain, right? Yeah, that's going to be a little hard to work through and remind yourself to be this awakened, aware person, right? Because you're in that moment of emotional release, embodying that child that needs to release, right? And so again, finding the tools and being able to a degree systemize it. I don't want it to sound super rigid, but in a way systemize the process for yourself so that okay, and again this takes practice, but okay, here's the pattern. I'm aware of the pattern. Now I can do this, this, and this for me to experience the feeling. And then I can do this and this to work through that feeling. And then I can do this to then discover for myself who I actually am, you know? So there is some solace in terms of being able to find a process for yourself
Yeah.
that can guide you through it so that you're not just feeling like a fish out of water all the time, you know? But I will say that that again takes some practice and consistency to be able to get to that point, because at first you are going to feel like you're drowning a little bit
Hmm.
because you are,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah, and no, having systems is good, and there can be as much or as little rigidity to systems as you want to. And just like, everything's a cycle anyway, and we always circle back to our cycles no matter how healed we are or how much work we still have to do. And just knowing self-awareness is knowing, yeah, what works for you and what doesn't, so that you come back to your systems in a sense of, sometimes what works for you today won't work for you the next time. And then
Mhm.
sometimes what didn't work for you today will work for you next time. And
Exactly.
it is just, you have all of these noodles that you're going to start throwing when you notice that things are arising, and you're like, okay, let me throw this noodle at the wall. Nope, that one didn't stick today. Let me see about
Right.
this one. And you just can't kind of keep going through them. And if nothing else, it I, not necessarily distracts, because it both does and doesn't distract. Like, it doesn't interrupt the process really, because you are caring for it. It's like a kid when when a baby's crying, and somebody, I don't know if you've been around a lot of like babies, but they'll start crying. And I have two children, and every time one of them would start crying, people around me would be like, "What's wrong with them?" No, they didn't tell
Right.
me. So you just
Right.
trying stuff until something works. They'll be like, and then like people will be like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what to do either, man. You bounce it for a little while and see if that helps. And if that doesn't help, then try to feed it. And if that doesn't help, then change its
Right.
diaper. I don't know. You're still caring for the problem. And
Right.
bringing that back to caring for yourself as an adult, it's the same thing. Do you need a nap? Do you need some healthy food? What have
Right.
you been feeding yourself lately? Did you have a lot of fried food, a lot of candy, some cookies? Maybe
Right.
let's put some greenery in there. Let's have an
Mhm.
orange.
Mhm.
Do you need to just create some space? Do you need to stretch a little bit? Do you need to take a walk? And so you're just trying all of these things, and having a bunch of tools in your toolbox, a bunch of noodles to throw at the wall, uh, it helps distract you from the hardness of it. So
Yeah.
instead of just sitting in it and mulling in it, and because a lot of us want to just like crawl in bed and never leave, right? We fall into that depression trap, and you're like, well, self-care, I'm taking a nap, and then it lasts for like 3 days. You
Mhm.
really got to be self-aware and pull yourself out of that, and not allow yourself to fall
Mhm.
into those negative, what you think is self-care patterns, because they're not actually helping. But if you're actively trying to find things to do,
Mhm.
not just mulling in it, but that's going to get the energy moving too. If you
Right.
if you go for a walk, or if you do some yoga, or even if you eat good, healthy food, it gets the
Mhm.
digestive tract moving. We want things to move. We want the energy to move. And the more we can get it to move, the quicker it will dissipate and move on out.
Right. Well, and emotions are energy in motion. So
Yep.
again, being able to use physical activities such as the walking or the meditating or the eating clean or whatever, not necessarily physical activity like exercise, but any sort of these activities, journaling even, right? Just like you said, is going to give it a little bit of a nudge, you know? And one thing that I think is important to highlight too is sometimes you're just gonna be in it for a bit, you know?
Mhm.
Like sometimes no matter how many different things you try, the feeling's not just gonna go away all of a sudden. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, you know? And nobody wants to be uncomfortable. Like nobody wants to sit in sadness for 3 days. But if that's what the body needs to experience, then that's what the body needs to experience. So ultimately, you are just alleviating the symptoms of sadness by doing these different activities to allow yourself to have the space to experience sadness, but without mulling in it, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so again, I think there's a difference in terms of sitting with an emotion with intention and then just sitting in the emotion,
Mm-hmm.
right? So again, I think it's just about finding the variety of tools that you can use, being able to start to discover for yourself, okay, what feels good to me today in this moment? What what different things can I use to try to see what does help me feel better? What does give me a little bit more of a nudge to just work my way through that spider web, however fast or slow you go, you know? But sometimes, and I know I've experienced this, sometimes I'll just be like, okay, let me try this and this and this and this and this because I want to stop feeling.
Yep.
And it's like, well, guess what? The more that you resist it by trying to alleviate the pain, because that's a form of resistance, right?
Mm-hmm.
The more glue that that pain is going to have.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's kind of contradictory sometimes in terms of knowing like, when do I just be in it and how do I accept being in it
Mm-hmm.
for however long I need to, right? While still paying attention to my body to know what actions I can take to help me work through this process with a little bit more ease and comfortability, right? Regardless, it's going to be uncomfortable to a degree. I can again alleviate some of that by a various by these various activities, but also I should not um try to do the activity just to stop feeling the feeling. I think that's kind of a that took me a while to understand. I think that's where a lot of people get stuck is we in the self-help world we're trying to in a way just stop feeling bad, right? And so it's like, okay, I'm diving into the pain, I'm dipping my toe in there, but then oh wait, I'm going to go be a self-help person and go journal and I'm going to meditate and I'm going to do this and this and this, but in a way that can be used to escape
Mm-hmm.
that pain too. So again, it's kind of a fine line you have to learn for yourself and walk on, and none of it's ever right or wrong either. Like you can't mess it up, no matter what you do, you're doing it the right way because it's happening, so that's the way it's meant to happen, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So there's a bit of reprieve and understanding that. But, you know, again, it just goes back to what is your body telling you? Like, can you listen enough to get guided as to what you need to do or experience to get you through that spider web and ultimately unleash or unveil that discovery of whoever the heck you are, And again, that's where that empowering state comes from because I've been able to take myself through this web using tools, bring that acceptance, bring that awareness, bring that love within all the many stages of the process for me to finally one day be able to go, oh, I just don't feel that way anymore. Or maybe I feel it every once in a while, but it's just like a little buzzing rather than like a pounding, you know?
Yeah, all encompassing versus, yeah, that happened.
Right. Right. Because I mean, we are still human. So we're ultimately still going to experience these things to a degree, no matter what we do, because this is life. Right. But it doesn't have to control us as much as it previously did with those original conditionings, that we, again, grew up experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah. Empowerment is at the end of all of this. And it's not really an end, but like you hit a point because you have to kind of process the trauma. You have to unpack everything. You have to understand and or not understand and accept that you don't. And then you have to touch on to figure out what aligns with you, what doesn't align with you, what aligns with you, but goes against everything that everybody claims is quote unquote good or bad. You gotta get that darkness, right? That shadow work, that because we all have pieces of us that, and I think a lot of empowerment comes from that shadow work of recognizing that you do have a little bit of a darkness in you, because we all do,
Yeah.
but we most of the time don't want to accept that. We don't want to, because we want to be good people, right? We're good people. Well, again, nothing is really good or bad in the actual universe and energy. There's no good or bad. Good and bad are concepts that humanity has created and
Mhm.
are trying to understand how to interact with one another in our lives. And like, sure, you have more desirable aspects and less desirable aspects, but even that is pretty relative. And so you really have to learn that pretty much everything is grayscale, everything's a spectrum.
Mhm.
And can you accept the parts of you that other people may consider quote unquote bad just because they're culturally taboo, like tattoos
Right.
or piercings? Are
Right.
are they really all that? Like, come on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Again, I think the whole point of empowerment is to discover what is in alignment with you. What are your actual beliefs? Yes, they're still going to be influenced by society and family and whatnot, but you know, maybe what I originally was brought up to believe isn't actually in alignment with what I have discovered for myself growing into an adult. And now I'm going to change that belief a little bit and move it a little bit more over here.
Mhm.
To a degree, I'm still going to get some pings from this, right? But that's not my identity anymore. And so, really, we're learning to unidentify with the taboos, the belief systems that we've, again, been brought on to believe, to be able to discover what you believe and then being able to live authentically as that. And
Own it.
and that's yeah, and that's where all that fear, uncertainty, and doubt comes in too, because again, I first have to become aware of the belief system. Then I have to go, wait, maybe that's not me. Okay, I think this is me. Oh shit, now I've gotta be that. Oh shit,
That's
now that
scary.
means I'm gonna have to put myself out there in front of those people.
What are they gonna say?
Yeah, what's the judgment going to be? What am I going to be exiled? Am I,
Oh
there's
yeah.
all of that. Yes, there's all of that that comes to it. And it's terrifying. It's
Yep.
terrifying, but it's also beautiful. Like, again, there's so much beauty in this process, I believe.
Yeah.
And although I might not think it when I'm in it, you know, I still go through my shit, right? But the beauty is just that there there really is nothing else like stepping into who you are, and there's
Mhm.
really nothing else like being able to authentically be that version of self that's confident, that knows who he or she is, that has a sense of direction and purpose in life and a passion for that, and is taking the actions necessary to manifest the life that they want,
Mhm.
right? And does that mean it's all going to be perfect and you're going to, fart rainbows and eat unicorns? No, that's not what's going to happen, right? But I can start to live in a space of just so much higher alignment with so much more connection, finding your groups of people that do believe and think and similarly to you, expanding that knowledge and awareness, expanding that perception, right? And starting to understand that there are various ways of living and existing versus the one way that we were taught originally, right? There's so many more cultures, there's so much more to learn.
Mhm.
There's so much that we don't know in three-dimensional reality and in various levels of consciousness, right? So it's really just, I see it as an exploration of opportunity of what do I want to play with next? Like, what's in alignment with me over here today? Okay, now what do I want to do over here? And how am I also being myself throughout this exploration? And again, we're all going to change over time. So as I'm exploring, going, oh, I like this, I'm going to hold on to that. Ooh, I like that, I'm going to hold on to that. Okay, well, maybe I don't really want this anymore, and maybe I don't want that anymore. And, we're just ever evolving.
Mhm.
to continue being the authentic being that you really already are. Although we talk a lot, and I even use this terminology of like stepping into this authentic self, really we are always our authentic selves. You can't not be.
Yeah.
But it's just learning to be in more alignment or attunement to what you want and desire and want to cultivate, rather than just living with the existence of the conditioning like we already talked about.
Yeah, and people, people think, because it's pretty easy, honestly, to identify the people who are living in their empowerment. Um, and they become targets a lot of the time for people who are not. And the people who are not look at the people who are, and they're like, oh, they create all these stories in their head to why they have that and they don't. And it's like, oh, I bet life was easier on them, and I bet everything was handed to them, and oh, they're so confident, I bet they've never had a, whatever, whatever, whatever. And the truth of the matter is, from my experience, the people who are living in their authentic empowerment type of selves have been through a lot and have done a ton of work to dig themselves out of that place, because they recognized where they were and they decided that they didn't like it and they didn't want to be there. So how do I get out of here? And they keep, and that's really the difference right there. And which I understand. I just wanted to touch on that because I think the vast majority of people are still living in that low vibrational state of, uh, everything must be easier for them, or they're so lucky, everything's good in their life, and look what they're doing. They're so, oh, they don't have to do that and they don't have to do this. And it's like, no, they just, they were stubborn and decided that they didn't want to live like
Yeah,
essentially everybody else, more
right.
or less.
Well, and what I would say on that too is kind of going back to the polarities, right? You have we'll just say the enlightened side and then the conditioned side, right? Really, we're all the same, but whatever. Okay. We have these two polar opposites that have really experienced similar things, but are just living in two different ways. And I think, I do think there's a lot of people on this enlightened side that do have a little bit of sometimes comparison and shame and blame to this side of the realm. And then obviously this side of the realm having the comparison, shame and blame, and jealousy and whatnot for this side of the realm. And ultimately, regardless, there should really only be compassion for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
because like you said, this person has only really gotten to this point not because they were handed it to them, but because they did the work that we've discussed that is challenging,
Mm-hmm.
and dealt with the trauma and the pain and all of that, right? Whereas this person hasn't yet done that work. It doesn't mean either one is right or wrong. It's just, okay, we all need to have compassion for everybody's stories and understand their perspectives of where they're living from. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but at the same time, I see it as, okay, choose your hard. It's
Yep.
hard to live over here.
Yep.
It's hard to live in pain and trauma every day. It's hard to have to scrape by trying to live paycheck to paycheck and being in shitty relationships and being unhappy every day. Like, that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard. It's also hard looking at the pain that you're living in, facing that consciously, doing the work that it takes. Again, it has taken me a decade to begin to cultivate better eating habits, understand how to exercise, have regular meditation and journaling practices, start working with my emotions, develop my mental health, develop emotional awareness, like all of the things that nobody wants to do because it's easier to eat junk food and watch TV.
Yep.
But eating junk food and watching TV is what keeps us in this dulled state of experiencing that pain. So really, either way, you're experiencing pain. Which way do you want to experience it? Do you want to experience it with some distractions and some things that might taste kind of good, really only because we've been taught that they taste good? Or
Honestly.
I mean, honestly, it's really disgusting when you get past that point. But
Please.
or or do you want to put in the freaking work and dedicate yourself to it? And again, neither one is right or wrong. Neither one is better than the other. I obviously have my preference, right? Because of my experience, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with either one. Ultimately, it's just compassion for everybody because they might just not be ready to experience it yet. They might not be ready to face the pain. They might not be capable of facing that pain
Mhm,
right now, right? Again, either they're going to choose to do it or life is going to make them do it,
mhm.
right?
And then
Because look at people who experience cancer, let's just say, yeah, they go through a life-changing experience and then their perspective shifts and then usually their whole life changes after that.
mhm, that's true.
So again, it comes down to that choice. Choose your hard. Which hard do you want to live? What is in more alignment with you? What are you capable of at that time? And don't judge yourself for it.
Mhm.
Just be in it. That's it.
Yeah, humaning is hard, period. It doesn't
Yeah.
doesn't matter. And yes, love and compassion. And that's why, we need to get closer back to our communities and our villages and help one another. And that's easier said than done, but I think that we're working on it. And I think we're doing a really good job at identifying all of the internet. I'm so happy about it.
It does bring so much more awareness and connection, which is beautiful. But it also breeds so much more comparison and judgment because it's so easy to access. And we also see what people will show you. We don't see the truth behind everything. So again, I think it's important for us to remember that no matter what, all we can do is be there for ourselves. And no matter how many other people we have in our corners, that's great. But ultimately, really, you just got yourself. And you've
Honestly.
got to be the one to get yourself through it. You're the one to make the decisions and the choices. And you have the power to do so if you're brave enough to step into that power. And when you step into that power, and you do the work, you really get to experience that expansion, that love, that connection, that acceptance. And then in doing so, you yourself, just by enacting that, gets to spread that light and set an example almost to everybody else in your realm that's experiencing pain, because we all are, right? How to do that as well.
Mhm.
And again, I think that is the big shift that we're seeing in the collective now of more understanding and acceptance of people and everybody discovering themselves because yeah, that looks a little nicer, doesn't it?
Yeah, you're exactly right. The only thing any of us are capable of is working on ourselves. We cannot change anybody else. We can help them to an extent, but you really have to be careful with that and hold your boundaries. For the most part, the best help you can be to anyone is leading by example. Yeah. So this hour went by crazy fast, which means it must be an awesome episode. I had a really good time.
I had a great time. I feel like I went on a lot of tangents, and then the dog obviously was a
That's the
distraction.
nature of the
But
game.
but oh well. But I had a good time. Yeah, that was really fun.
So you want to tell people how they can find you, get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So on Facebook, you can look me up as Monique Grover, or on Instagram, it is at Our Untapped Potential. And you can kind of see everything I've got going on there.
Cool. And I will definitely link those around. Thank you
Perfect.
so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right.